I should have turned back somewhere near the third hour of snow, when the highway vanished beneath a blur of ice-slicked asphalt and the wind screamed against the windshield like a warning I wasn't meant to ignore. But I kept going, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned a ghostly white, stubbornly guided by the ache of longing and the fragile hope that love, no matter how frayed or neglected, could still be mended with a surprise and a cake. It wasn't the kind of storm you brave for errands or casual visits, the kind where weather alerts pinged constantly on your phone and roadside visibility dropped to something less than a memory. This storm was the kind that made your thoughts feel loud in your head, the kind that made you question every choice you'd ever made while your headlights carved a tunnel through the white void and the GPS kept rerouting as if it too doubted your sanity. But I wasn't driving for logic. I wasn't navigating this mess of snow and silence because it made sense. I was doing it because tomorrow was my sister's birthday, and for the first time in years, I wanted to show up without warning, without ceremony, without the awkward formality that had slowly crept into our relationship like frost through window panes no one bothers to seal properly anymore. I was doing it because, once upon a time, we used to be everything to each other. I can still hear the sound of our childhood whispers, the way our voices would rise and fall in our shared room late into the night, synchronized like two notes in a lullaby only we knew how to sing. I remember how we used to make up stories under the blanket, flashlight pressed between our knees, pretending we were explorers or secret agents or two princesses exiled from a kingdom where everyone forgot how to love. It sounds silly now, almost unbearably sweet, but in those moments we were a fortress, a bond of blood and imagination and fierce loyalty that not even the bitter silences of our parents could dissolve. There were nights, especially after one of Dad's temper spells or Mom's depressive spirals, where she would crawl into my bed without saying anything and just bury her head under my arm. We didn't have to speak. We knew. Our shared pain was the quiet kind. The kind that never made it into family photos but etched itself into every future version of ourselves. And even when we started growing apart, when high school made her cool and elusive, and college made me busy and ambitious, I still believed deep down that our foundation was unshakable, that no matter what, we would always find our way back to each other. But years have a way of piling up like snowfall, don't they? You keep promising yourself you'll call next week, that you'll visit when work calms down, that you'll write more than just a quick happy birthday on Facebook. And then one day you realize you don't even know what her living room looks like anymore. So I baked the cake myself, from scratch. It took 4 hours, 2 failed frosting attempts, and one emotional breakdown midway through decorating the top with delicate fondant roses. But I did it. It was the kind of cake she used to dream about when we were kids. Light vanilla sponge, a hint of almond buttercream so smooth it practically sighed under the spatula. I'd even piped her name across the top in soft pink cursive, adding a tiny heart over the I like I used to when writing notes to her in middle school. I kept telling myself the cake would say everything I couldn't. I miss you. I'm sorry. Please let's not be strangers forever. And now, 5 grueling hours into the snowstorm, with my legs numb from the heater blowing only at half capacity and my breath fogging up the glass, I was finally turning onto her street. It looked like something out of a Christmas card, the old colonial houses lined with snow-covered hedges, the yellow glow of porch lights diffused through flurries of white, a few kids in oversized coats dragging sleds back home. Her house was at the end, the one with the magnolia tree out front that we'd once tried to climb and failed spectacularly, landing in a heap of scraped knees and laughter so contagious the neighbor across the street called it the sound of summer. I turned off the engine and just sat there for a second, the silence inside the car louder than the storm outside. My heart was thudding in my chest too fast, too loud, like it already knew something I didn't. I unbuckled my seatbelt, carefully reached for the cake box on the passenger seat, and took one deep breath before stepping out into the biting cold. The snow crunched beneath my boots as I made my way up her steps, each one feeling more like a question than a destination. Her windows glowed with warmth, the soft flicker of candles or maybe just lamps with those yellow bulbs we always loved. Like sunlight that doesn't burn, she used to say. I smiled, gripping the cake tighter, my hands trembling not from cold but anticipation. I eased open the door. She never locked it when she was home. The habit had terrified me when she first moved here, but she just laughed and said, if someone wants to steal my collection of unpaid parking tickets, they're welcome to it. The warmth hit me first, a rush of heat and cinnamon, like cookies baking or cider mulling on the stove. The hallway was exactly how I remembered it from my last visit years ago. The same navy blue rug, the mismatched coat hooks, the photo of us as kids by the mirror. She hadn't changed a thing. I slipped off my boots, holding the cake like a sacred offering, and tiptoed down the hall. I could hear voices, laughter, clinking glasses. She had company. Of course she did. It was her birthday. And that was perfect. I'd walk in, shout something ridiculous like, "Did someone order a sister with extra frosting?" And she'd squeal, and everyone would laugh, and we'd hug, and it would be like no time had passed at all. But something stopped me just before I reached the living room. It was a voice. His voice. Familiar, low, smooth in a way that made my stomach knot instantly with recognition. A voice I hadn't heard in 5 years. A voice I never wanted to hear again. "Mark." I froze in the hallway, suddenly unable to breathe, the cake trembling slightly in my hands. I leaned closer, peeking around the edge of the wall, careful not to let my boots squeak on the wood floor. There he was, sitting on the arm of her couch, holding a glass of red wine like it belonged to him, his legs crossed casually, that smug tilt to his smile still intact. He hadn't changed, same tousled hair, same expensive watch, same look in his eyes like he owned every room he entered. And there she was, my sister, laughing at something he said. Leaning toward him. Touching his knee. No. I took a step back, my foot pressing against the floorboard with a loud creak. Silence fell in the room, sudden and sharp. The kind of silence that makes your heart stutter. "Hello," she called out, her voice cheerful, a little curious. I backed up farther, panic blooming in my chest. "Is someone there?" she asked again, her footsteps growing louder. I turned around and hurried down the hall, fumbling for my boots, still holding the cake like a weight I couldn't put down. My fingers were shaking too much to untie the laces, so I shoved my feet in, half-laced, half-bare, and reached for the door. It swung open before I could touch the knob. She stood there, eyes wide with shock and something else, confusion, maybe, or guilt. "Jenna," she breathed. "What are you?" I held up the cake between us, like it could somehow shield me from the truth. "Happy birthday," I said, trying to smile, but my voice cracked halfway through the second word. She blinked, once, twice, her lips parting like she wanted to say something, like she knew this was a moment we couldn't come back from. Then he appeared behind her. "Mark." His hand landed gently on her shoulder, possessive, familiar. And that's when I knew. This wasn't some coincidence. This wasn't some casual reconnection. This was betrayal. "You didn't tell her?" I asked, my voice rising despite everything inside me begging to stay calm. Her face flushed. "Jenna, I was going to." But I was already stepping back into the snow, into the cold, into the part of me that understood the difference between childhood promises and adult choices. The cake slipped from my hands. It landed with a soft thud in the snow, frosting smearing across the pristine white like a wound. I turned and walked away, her voice calling after me, his silence somehow louder than both of us, calm. The snow had already started to slip down the back of my collar, wet and merciless, but I couldn't feel the cold, not really, because something inside me was already beginning to freeze in a way the weather couldn't replicate. A deeper kind of cold that no scarf or coat could possibly defend against. I stood just outside the front door, still gripping the cake like a lifeline I didn't realize I needed until that exact second, while my fingers tightened around the box as if doing so could hold the truth at bay for just a moment longer. I could see her living room clearly through the frosted glass panel beside the door. The lights inside flickered with the kind of golden glow reserved for happy moments, the candles flickering from the sideboard, the wine glasses catching reflections like little echoes of celebration, the velvet couch sagging slightly beneath the weight of people who felt comfortable enough to laugh with their feet tucked under them. It should have been beautiful. It should have felt like home. But then I heard her voice. Clear, confident, and unmistakably cruel. It carried above the others like it had always done in high school theater productions, those lead roles she never auditioned for but always landed anyway because of her smile, her cheekbones, or the way our mother used to say she just lit up a room without even trying. She was lighting up the room now, sure, but the light was sharp-edged and scalding, like a spotlight that burns. "Honestly," she said, her voice laced with that exaggerated sigh she always used when she was trying to sound put upon, "I was kind of hoping she'd crash the party or something. It would have made my life easier, honestly." The laughter that followed didn't sound confused or hesitant. It didn't sound like people unsure if she was joking. It sounded real. Immediate. Eager. As if they'd been waiting for her to say exactly that. As if cruelty, when spoken with perfect comedic timing, somehow earned applause. I couldn't move at first. My knees had suddenly become fragile, trembling under the weight of something far heavier than my sister's birthday cake. The box wobbled slightly in my hands, the buttercream inside surely smearing, collapsing under the same unbearable weight that now pressed down on my chest, compressing every breath into something shallow and sharp. I had come through 5 hours of a snowstorm for a joke. For a punchline with my name in it. The door was still cracked open just an inch, but it may as well have been a wall. I pressed my back against the siding of the porch, heart thudding so loudly in my ears that for a moment, I thought someone might hear it and come outside. My breath caught, jagged and uneven, as I stared down at the cake in my hands, that stupid beautiful cake with pink cursive frosting and a heart over the eye, and I realized in one sudden, devastating moment that I had built the entire idea of this visit, the idea of us, on a foundation that no longer existed. Maybe it hadn't for years. I pressed my forehead against the doorframe, the cold seeping into my skin like a cruel kind of comfort. I wanted to disappear into the snow, to be swallowed by it, to dissolve into the silence before she saw me standing there like some idiot with her arms full of hope. Because it was hope, wasn't it? That's what I had carried for 5 hours through ice in fear and aching joints. Not cake. Not decoration. Just hope. And it had been a joke to her. A prop in a story she was telling to people who laughed and didn't even ask if the character she was mocking might be standing right outside. There was a part of me that wanted to throw the cake. Not just set it down or walk away, but to hurl it into the street, to watch it explode into frosting and crumbs and shattered symbolism. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not because I still hoped she'd open the door and explain, but because that cake was the last piece of who I was before this moment. And I wasn't ready to destroy her yet. Because something inside me had shifted. Not broken. Not quite. But twisted. The way metal does under pressure, bending into something harder. I turned slowly, my fingers numb now not just from cold but from the tremor of betrayal that kept pulsing through me, rhythmic and relentless. I reached for the doorknob with my free hand, not to open it, not yet, but to steady myself. And that's when I heard Mark laugh. Low. Amused. The way he always did when someone crossed a line, and he loved it. She probably made one of those vanilla almond cakes again, he said casually, his voice like a blade dipped in silk. With the little frosting roses? God, it's like she's stuck in 1999. Still thinks effort means something. My throat tightened so quickly I had to cover my mouth with my scarf to muffle the gasp. I had made that cake. I had piped those roses. I had chosen that flavor because it was her favorite growing up, the one she asked for on every birthday until we left for college. I didn't realize I was crying until the first tear slipped down my cheek and froze instantly in the wind. I stood there like a statue of every version of myself that had ever believed we could go back, that love was enough, that family forgave, that history meant something. But this was no reunion. It was a performance. And I was the fool who had shown up without a script. I took a shaky breath and pushed the door open wider, not with joy, not with the playful shout I had rehearsed in the car, not with any trace of the person who had driven here thinking she could fix something. I stepped inside silently like a shadow crossing into a scene she wasn't invited to. The hallway swallowed the sound of my boots against the wood floor, and the cake wobbled gently in my grip as I made my way toward the doorway of the living room. I paused just before the threshold, taking in the scene like an outsider observing a play. 12 people. Maybe 13. Her living room was fuller than I'd expected. Co-workers, maybe. Neighbors. 1 or 2 familiar faces from our childhood, though none looked at me now. They were too focused on her, on the way she laughed with her head tilted just so, her wine glass raised like a queen in mid-toast. And Mark, seated next to her on the couch, his arm casually slung behind her shoulders, his fingers grazing her sweater in a way that made my stomach twist. She looked delighted. Radiant even. As if nothing she had just said, nothing I had just heard, had any consequence or weight. I took one single step forward. Someone near the fireplace noticed me first, their smile faltering as they nudged the person beside them. The ripple of awareness spread slowly, awkwardly, like tension rolling through the room in a slow, suffocating wave. And then her eyes found mine. She froze. A full 2 seconds passed where neither of us spoke. Her expression shifted, just slightly, not with guilt, not with apology, but with something far worse, inconvenience. "Jinnah," she said finally, the word curling around her lips like it tasted sour. What are you doing here?" I held up the cake like an answer, but my voice came out flat. "I came to surprise you. It's your birthday." A silence so dense it felt physical filled the room. She stood, slowly, wine glass still in hand, not stepping toward me but standing her ground like a general surveying an unexpected enemy. "I wasn't expecting you," she said, and her voice had that same careful cadence she always used when she was lying to Mom about who broke the vase. "No," I said, louder now, the sound trembling despite my best effort. "But you were hoping I would. You said so. Just now." Her smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" Mark chuckled behind her. "Someone's been eavesdropping." The rage that surged in me was quiet, controlled. Not a fire. Not an explosion. Just a cold, steady wave that made my spine straighten and my voice lower. "You said you were hoping I'd crash," I whispered, but it carried across the room like a bell tolling. "That it would make your life easier." Someone near the back of the room muttered something awkward, maybe, yikes, maybe, oh no, but I didn't care. I looked only at her. She blinked then shrugged. "It was a joke, Jinnah." "God, can you even take a joke anymore? That's your excuse?" I said, stepping closer, holding the cake between us like a peace offering turned into a shield. "After everything, that's all you have?" She tilted her head, her voice dripping with that syrupy cruelty she'd perfected in middle school. "After everything? What everything, Jinnah? A few birthday calls? A cake every year? You haven't been around in ages. You show up now acting like we're best friends? Like you're some long-lost heroine returning to rescue a relationship that's already over." Each word hit like a slap, not for the pain they carried, but for the truth they betrayed, that she hadn't just drifted away. She had untied the anchor and let the ship drift while I kept trying to pull it back. "I thought we were still sisters," I whispered. "I thought that meant something." She laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh, sweetie," she said, taking the cake from my hands without warning. "Sisters grow up. They grow apart. It's not personal." She turned, placed the cake on the kitchen counter, and picked up her wine glass again as if she hadn't just gutted me in front of a room full of strangers. Mark raised his glass in mock salute. The room was silent, waiting for my next move. But I had none. There was nothing left to say. I walked out the door and into the snow, this time not trembling with hope, but with something sharper. Something that would carry me through the next storm. I didn't remember placing the cake on the foyer table. I didn't remember how my hands had moved, how the box had come to rest perfectly on the little marble console by the coat rack, or how I'd even opened the door to leave again without anyone stopping me. There was a strange grace to it all, as if my body had gone into autopilot the moment my heart shut down, mechanical, deliberate, and heartbreakingly silent. I slipped out like a ghost might, unnoticed, weightless and half-vanished already, my boots brushing softly against the carpet runner, my hand light on the doorknob, my breath shallow and quiet like I didn't want to disturb anything, not even the lie I just walked into. No one followed me. Not her. Not him. Not a single one of those wine-warm, joke-laughing faces who had smiled as she skewered me with cruelty wrapped in charisma. The wind caught the door as it closed behind me, flinging it shut with a bang that echoed through the icy stillness like a punctuation mark at the end of a sentence I would never rewrite. The porch lights gleamed falsely golden in the storm, glowing too warm for how cold everything had become inside me. The snow had grown heavier now, fatter flakes that tumbled like feathers from a broken pillow, sticking to my hair, my lashes, the scarf I barely remembered tying. I didn't think. I just walked back to the car, not even brushing the snow from the windshield, not even caring if I could see more than a few feet ahead. I turned the key, and the engine sputtered, then roared to life with a reluctant shudder, as if even it knew I shouldn't be doing this, shouldn't be getting back on the road in the middle of a blizzard with headlights that blurred more than they illuminated, with windshield wipers that squealed against ice that hadn't thawed since I parked. But I drove anyway. Not toward a destination. Not toward safety or home or reason. I drove because staying would have killed something in me I couldn't afford to lose. The highway was empty now, abandoned by all but the most reckless or desperate, and I wasn't sure which of those I had become. The snow spun like a carousel outside my windows, blinding and relentless, coating the world in a layer of erasure that felt oddly fitting. There was no past or future here, only white, Only the steady whir of the engine and the ache in my chest that pulsed in time with every breath I took through gritted teeth. I don't know how long I drove before the tears came. They started slowly, as if afraid to break the silence that had taken root inside me. A single drop down my cheek. Then another. Then more. Until I was sobbing into the steering wheel, breath hitching, hands trembling, the kind of crying that doesn't make noise but shatters anyway. My vision blurred, not just from snow but from everything that had come undone in the span of a few cruel minutes. Because it wasn't just the joke. It wasn't just the cake or the party or the way she dismissed me like an outdated song on a playlist she no longer played. It was all of it. It was every birthday card I'd mailed when she was away at school, even when she never replied. It was every phone call I had left unanswered, every voicemail where I said, just checking in, pretending not to notice that she never once checked back. It was the care packages I sent her after our father's funeral, the ones she never thanked me for but still posted about online with captions like, "My sister's the best." It was every memory I'd hoarded like treasure, thinking they were sacred when to her they were probably just clutter. And I hated that I believed the bond meant the same to her as it did to me. I hated that I had never seen it unraveling until I stood on her porch, listening to her say that my presence would have made her life easier, because it implied that my absence already had. The snow thickened around me as I drove, swallowing the road, the signs, the world, until I wasn't sure if I was on a highway or just memory. I slowed, pulled onto the shoulder, turned off the engine, and let the silence swallow me. For a long time I didn't move. I just sat there, forehead resting against the steering wheel, my breath fogging up the glass like ghosts trying to get in. I thought about the time she broke her arm when we were kids, how I stayed beside her hospital bed for hours while she slept, holding her hand because she hated needles and had begged me not to leave. I thought about how she used to call me Bug when we were little, how she braid my hair before picture day and whisper "We've got this" in my ear when I was scared. I thought about the way she looked at me tonight, like I was an old photograph someone left in a drawer too long, faded, inconvenient, out of place. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of the blur. I didn't want to look. But I did. 2 missed calls, Lila. 1 new message, Lila. Jenna, please call me. I didn't mean it like that. I was just joking. I'm so sorry. Please just call me. My fingers hovered over the screen. I didn't reply. Another buzz. A voicemail this time. Then another. Then a third. And then my phone began to light up in a stream of names, people I hadn't spoken to in years, acquaintances from back when we shared mutual friends, people who had probably only been invited to that party because it made the guest list look fuller. Emily R. I'm so sorry, Jenna. I don't think she meant it. It was a dumb joke. Everyone was drinking. Nora T. You didn't deserve that. I felt sick when I realized you'd heard it. Please let me know you're okay. Mike H. She's freaking out. I think she really regrets it. I didn't laugh, for the record. Not really. Not really? What does that even mean? Did they laugh politely? Did they squirm? Did anyone look toward the door and wonder if I was already standing there, already breaking? The screen glowed in my lap like an accusation. The worst part wasn't that she had said what she did. The worst part was that she had said it so easily, like it lived just beneath the surface all along, waiting for the right moment to emerge with a wine glass in hand and a room full of accomplices. I didn't cry again. Not then. The tears had dried somewhere between mile marker 54 and the dark stretch of road I'd pulled off onto. Now there was only the hum of the heater and the sound of snow thudding softly against the windows, as if the world was trying to hush me into numbness. I could have called her. I could have listened to the voicemails. I could have texted back with something cutting or clever or even kind. But I didn't. Because I couldn't unhear it. Because no apology could rewind the moment her voice, once my comfort, had become a weapon. Because part of me had broken tonight in a way that didn't bleed, didn't bruise, but echoed. I started the car again, not because I knew where I was going, but because I knew I couldn't stay still. The snow was relentless, but so was I. And somewhere beyond this storm was a version of myself I hadn't met yet. One who didn't wait on the doorstep of people who laughed at her pain. One who didn't build cakes out of memories and hope they could hold up under bitterness. One who didn't believe that history obligated her to stay. I drove into the white, windshield wiper struggling, breath slow and steady, the ache still present but quieter now. And as I passed the exit for her town, I didn't look back. I hadn't spoken to her in weeks, not through text, not over the phone, not even in those half-hearted ways people sometimes use when they want to test the waters without actually wading in. There were no forwarded memes, no late-night apologies typed with too many ellipses, no carefully curated selfies pretending at normalcy. Just silence. A rich, echoing silence that stretched between us like a canyon, too wide to shout across and too deep to bridge without falling. And honestly, that silence had become a kind of healing. It hadn't started that way, of course. At first, it was sharp and raw, like walking barefoot across broken glass while trying to smile at the people passing by. There were moments I picked up my phone instinctively, out of habit more than anything, as if muscle memory still believed she was someone I could lean on, someone who might send a voice memo with that airy laugh and a remember when? That could glue the pieces of us back together. But nothing came. And eventually, the urge to reach out withered away like something starved of sunlight. Instead, I had turned inward. Not with bitterness but with clarity. I threw myself into my work in a way I hadn't in years, not because I needed distraction, but because it reminded me of who I was before I started living half alive in the shadows of other people's needs. I took long walks again, bundled up in my coat and scarf, listening to the crunch of gravel under my boots like it was a rhythm that belonged only to me. I deleted old photos, archived conversations, and finally, unfollowed her on every platform where her carefully curated life had once stung like lemon on a paper cut. And I stayed off the radar. So when the invitation arrived, glossy and cream-colored, with gold calligraphy embossed along the edges like a wedding announcement, I knew exactly what it was before I even opened the envelope. It practically reeked of performance. Join us for a night of hope, a fundraising gala in support of reconciliation and renewal. Hosted by Lila M. Grayson. I nearly laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the irony felt too perfectly scripted, like the universe had grown tired of subtlety and decided to hand me a spotlight instead. Attached to the card was a handwritten note in her familiar, loopy cursive, once comforting, now laced with manipulation masked as grace. Jenna, I've realized how deeply I hurt you and I want to make things right, not just privately but publicly. Please come. Let's show people what healing really looks like. With love always. Lila. No apology. Just presentation. It wasn't about us. It was about her image. Because after that night, the one where her words cut through me sharper than the wind on my face as I stood outside her house, people had talked. More than she expected, more than she could control. Apparently, not everyone at the party found her jokes charming once the context became clear. A few friends reached out in quiet horror, ashamed of their silence, their complicity, their nervous laughter. Some even distanced themselves entirely, realizing that what had once looked like confidence was really cruelty dressed in sequins. And Lila? Well, she had never handled criticism well, not when it touched her carefully polished exterior, not when it exposed the cracks she tried so hard to pretend didn't exist. So of course she wanted a public reconciliation. Not to repair the relationship, but to repair her reflection in the eyes of others. But I hadn't spent the last month climbing out of that wreckage just to walk back in for a photo op. No, I was going to attend. But not for her. And certainly not to forgive. I was going for every version of me that had swallowed pain so quietly it almost became invisible. I was going because sometimes healing requires a reckoning. And I intended to deliver it with poise sharp enough to slice through every lie she'd ever wrapped in laughter. The venue was predictably grand, an upscale art museum with ceilings that arched like cathedrals and walls adorned with pieces so expensive they had to be guarded, as if beauty alone made them sacred. Chandeliers glittered above a sea of silk and champagne, and the air buzzed with that particular tension that always accompanies events where everyone pretends they aren't watching each other. I walked in wearing the same black gown I'd worn to a charity dinner 2 years ago, tailored, classic, and entirely unremarkable, because this night wasn't about being seen. It was about being heard. She saw me the moment I entered. Of course she did. Her smile faltered for half a second before she slid it back into place, too polished to crack in front of an audience. She made her way toward me through the crowd with the precision of someone trained in emotional damage control, her champagne flute barely tilting as she walked. Jenna, she said softly, placing a hand on my arm like we were sisters in every way that mattered. You came. I offered her the same poised smile I'd perfected over the last month, the kind that didn't reach my eyes, but didn't need to. I said I would. She glanced around the room, taking note of who was watching, and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear like she was preparing for a close-up. I'm so glad. This means everything to me. I didn't reply. Instead, I stepped past her toward the stage where a microphone stood waiting. Because I'd already spoken with the event coordinator 2 days ago. I had made a donation. A significant one. And with that donation came a small condition, one no one had refused. 5 minutes on the mic. 5 minutes was all I needed. As the music faded and the MC's voice quieted the crowd, I stepped forward, heels silent on the polished floor, the weight of the moment pressing gently against my spine like a reminder, walk tall. Walk true. The lights shifted toward the podium, and I could feel every pair of eyes turning, waiting for something safe, something sentimental, something PR-approved. But I wasn't here for that. I was here to reclaim the truth. I reached for the microphone, my fingers steady, my voice clear, every word honed not in anger, but in certainty. Good evening, I began, my voice echoing gently across the room, smooth as the satin lining of my gown. I was invited tonight to help celebrate healing, forgiveness, and sisterhood. And while I'd love to say that's why I'm standing here, it wouldn't be the truth. A pause. Not a single glass clinked. Not a whisper stirred. I continued slowly with the kind of calm that demands attention. Several weeks ago, I showed up at my sister's home with a birthday cake I'd made from scratch. It wasn't just flour and frosting, it was memory. It was effort. It was the last of the hope I had that we still meant something to each other beyond shared blood. A few heads turned toward Lila, whose face had gone rigid in its smile. I walked into her home without knocking, hoping to surprise her. What I heard instead was her voice. Loud. Certain. Laughing as she said she hoped I would crash the party. That it would make her life easier. A quiet gasp from somewhere near the bar. Still, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I left that cake on a foyer table and walked into a snowstorm, wondering if love ever really protects us, or just blinds us long enough to hurt us deeper. Now the room was a painting, frozen, eyes wide, mouth slightly parted in disbelief. I've been silent these past weeks. Not because I was licking wounds. Not because I was broken. But because I was building. I let that sentence breathe. Lila shifted beside the stage, her face now pale under the soft lighting. For years I supported my sister financially. Quietly. Out of loyalty. Out of a belief that family meant something, even when it wasn't mutual. I paid rent. I covered debts. I funded parties I was never invited to. I made sacrifices she never saw because I thought love should be invisible. A ripple of murmurs. And tonight, I want everyone to know that I've made one final choice, a redirection of that support. I lifted the check from my purse, thick and weighty, and turned it to face the cameras. This, I said, is a $75,000 donation to the Second Road Foundation, a community fund that provides housing, therapy, and legal support for accident survivors, people who, like me, were made into jokes they didn't deserve. You could have heard a pin drop. I am not a punchline. I am not a shadow. I am not a sister who will stay silent in the name of appearances. The final sentence curled from my lips like smoke. They joked about my crash but didn't realize they'd crashed their own future. Subscribe because the road to justice is just beginning. And with that I stepped down, heels clicking steadily, head held high, as the room erupted not in laughter but in stunned applause. Behind me, my sister stood motionless. And ahead of me, beyond the exit doors, beyond the cold night air, beyond the glinting lights of the city, was freedom. Thank you for riding every turn of this emotional highway. If you're ready for another story, another reckoning, or another rise from the ashes, just say the word. Would you forgive your family after overhearing something unforgivable, or is cutting ties the only true way forward?